Up, there it is. That's your second bell. Class is in session here at the Apartment Academy, the multifamily industry's only operations-focused podcast and your source for higher NOI. I am Daniel Cunningham, the Dean of the Apartment Academy, if you will, and today's guest lecturer is Lynn Musil. Lynn's the founder and CEO of PayReady. And PayReady is another one of these companies solving a real issue in the multifamily industry that a lot of people don't think about and realize that technology could step in and provide a better solution. So we are going to talk today about the post-resident experience, residents that move out, who have charges on their ledgers, how you work with them, how you go about collecting that balance. If you have been on the operations side, like most of you have been, you know that that's a pain in the neck. Lynn has a better solution for you. Let's hear about it. Here is Lynn Musil. Hello, Professor Musil. Welcome here to the Apartment Academy. Thanks for joining us here in Lecture Hall 101. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
Lynn, your company is very interesting in sort of the role, then the kind of the niche within the resident life cycle that you fill. Before we get into that, though, talk a little bit about how it is that you came to found PayReady. Were you on the operations side? Were you on the vendor side? How did you identify this problem?
Sure. Yeah, I've spent most of my career on the vendor side within multifamily housing. I started about 25 years ago with a company called Safe Rent that was a resident screening solution. That company was later purchased by a company called CoreLogic. And I headed up sales and some product design with that group. And then I went to a company called Onsite Manager that was involved in screening as well, but also was the first company to bring online leasing to multifamily housing. And then subsequently that company was sold. And I'd always wanted to start my own business in multifamily housing. I didn't really have a preconceived notion as to what that would be. I literally just went and talked to some of my clients and asked them what part of the resident life cycle had not been addressed with technology and needed some tools and cleanup. And so the feedback that I got in those discussions was that there was a lot of attention being paid to resident acquisition, resident management, but there was a pretty big void in terms of communication and management of post-residency communication, ledger cleanup, accounts receivable, everything really post-residency. So that was the start of the idea.
And so as a result, what is it that PayReady does to address that?
Yeah, so we are an accounts receivable CRM system and payment portal post-residency. So what happens is when a resident moves out, when their status is changed, moved out within the property management system, all of that resident information, their ledger details, their documents are all imported into the PayReady platform. And the PayReady system at that point takes over. So there's a portal created for the resident. The ledger is reconciled against any kind of, say, deposit alternative or renter's insurance that needs to be applied to the ledger. Oftentimes we are the final ledger of record that's provided to the resident. And the system then begins some automated, friendly, branded outreach for any kind of outstanding balance. And then we partner with staffing partners as well as a marketplace of collection agencies, if a balance goes that long, to keep track of everything and provide complete reporting and transparency back to the apartment operator all in one system.
And what was hard about that, Lynn? What are people that don't have the PayReady system? They're doing it the old way. What are they struggling with? What was the problem that solved?
Yeah, there's a variety of methodology that's applied to post-residency, but in general, most of the time, what would happen before we existed is a resident would move out, They would need to make the unit ready and available for move-in. So that resident would get moved out of the software system oftentimes before final balances were reconciled and recovered. And it was on the property staff to follow up on that. So there was really no system for it. It was literally notepads, Outlook, Excel. No way to communicate really back to the leadership team what was happening post-residency. And they were also expected to conduct collections or recoveries. So if they were having struggles getting that final balance recovered, it was really on the leasing staff. And they're not really trained for that, nor is it their best, favorite thing to do, or are they incentivized to do that? So oftentimes in that most crucial window of time when you'd be most successful in cleaning up that ledger, the communication is non-existent, and then if there's still a balance owed, eventually it gets sent to a collection agency. And there would be times where the resident's first interaction post move out would be with a collection agency, and they may not even know that they had a balance due in some cases. So there is really a big gray area at the most critical time, both to recover any kind of balance due, but also to leave a last impression with the resident and protect your brand. So there are a lot of things that were just, ignored and messy.
So let's talk about if you've got any insights into this, I'd love to hear insights into the kind of the economic ramifications of running a property in that kind of scenario. Like, what can you expect to collect if you've got leasing agents that are expected to call? Like, what % of tenant ledger charges remain uncollected, or how much longer do they take, or what % don't get collected at all? Like, are there any kind of economic factors you can share with us that should wake people up if they're still doing things the old way?
Sure. What we're finding is upwards of 60% of people leave owing something. Oftentimes it's small and it's minor once that ledger is reconciled and the deposit, insurance or bonds are applied, or renter's insurance is applied. But oftentimes there's something still owed by the resident, whether it's fees or damages or whatever it might be. It doesn't mean that it's always significant, like accelerated rent and big damages, those types of things. So there's roughly 60% of people leave owing something. And oftentimes that 80% of that can be collected in the first 20 days post move out, if you're diligent about it and you make it easy for the resident and they're aware of what's owed. Beyond that, over a 7-year period after that, we call that the initial wave of willingness to pay residents. So there's categories. There's people that want to pay and are able to pay, and then there are people that either are unwilling or unable to pay. And that's a pretty small percentage, but it can add up to fairly significant dollar amounts. So of those folks, over the course of about 7 years, you'll see somewhere around 20% recovery on total balance sent to recovery. What we have seen, if you really track recovery that takes that entire life cycle into account, we've done some studies with our clients where we've proven a net 20% lift back to the community versus prior workflows. It's a little challenging to compare it to what would traditionally be measured, which would strictly be collection agency work that are, the more significant damages that take longer and make their way all the way to a third-party recovery.
Yeah. And that's probably the default for most folks. If after that first 30 days, the leasing agents aren't able, whoever is that internally that's trying to collect those funds, they're not successful, they immediately turn to a collection agency. In most part, there are a number of them focused on in our industry, for which they're giving out how much typically do they give up once they go to a collection agency?
The standard is a 60-40 split, so 60% to the community, 40% to the agency. Sometimes that happens immediately. Other times there's not a real system in place to ensure that it happens consistently, and it can sit for 60 or 90 days before it's sent over, unless there's a real good process in place and integration.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they just write it off and they forget about it, and collection efforts don't really ever take place, right? That happens.
Yeah, I mean that's the other piece. The practice has been to write it off of the financials and send it to collections, and whatever comes back is found money. And before we existed, the agencies were essentially reporting on their own performance. So a check would be sent, and recovery reporting would be sent that would be curated by the agency themselves. One of the other differences about us is there are some agencies that have tools in place, but we have created a marketplace where we are an agnostic third-party software solution that the agencies take part in. And when they do that, they're agreeing to make all of their recovery efforts completely transparent and visible real time through our platform and through our reporting system. So there's not self-curation happening.
So I see. So the agencies, the collection agencies, are still working within the PayReady platform. Those efforts are being reported up into your platform. And so you provide, I'm guessing, a centralized way for the owner operators to see what's happening on their collection side.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Is there anything what feels different to the resident about this whole process from move out to, and then assuming they don't pay right away, to the collections process and resolution? What's better in the PayReady process?
What feels better to the resident is they're getting friendly communication immediately, both via technology as well as through staffing partner outreach. Those folks are trained to have those conversations. There's specific scripting in place that's branded. So the resident feels like it's a natural extension of their relationship with the community, and they're not missing communication or going through long periods of time of not knowing what's happening. So it just feels like a natural extension of that relationship, and then all the way through collections. So they're still getting a brand friendly experience, and overall. There's not the frustration of, again, missing communication or something being forgotten or not knowing that they owed a balance or whatever that might be. The other thing that the entire solution provides is good risk management and compliance boundaries, because you know that all of the outreach that's going through has been approved, all the communication tools are being tracked in one place and audited. There's not any kind of one-off conversation happening that might, get somebody on the leasing staff in trouble.
Yeah, fair housing, discriminatory practices, that kind of thing is what you're talking about.
Correct, and fair debt collection practices.
Right, fair debt collection practices. Okay, and the what is the pricing model for PayReady customers? How's that work?
The pricing model is basically pay for performance. So all of the money that is paid through the PayReady platform, there's a piece of that that's shared to us through our staffing partners. So the collection agencies as well as the first party staffing partners are sharing in those splits. And we're paid basically a distribution fee by those staffing and staffing partners and collection agencies. So there's no cost to the apartment community at all. We're only paid as we recover as a distribution marketing fee by the staffing and collection partners.
Got it. And has any of this? You've touched on that. There's it sounds like some automation. There's some actual. You said it's interesting here. I use the different term staffing partners versus collection agency. I guess the staffing partners are folks that are just really making phone calls on your behalf. They're not really collection agents, and then it gets handed over to a formal collections agency. Is that kind of the delineation?
Yeah, that's correct. In what we consider a first party staff support scenario, there are staffing partners that act as an extension of your accounts receivable team with the apartment operator right after move out during that first 30 to 90 days. And so they're just making friendly outreach calls on behalf of the apartment operator. And they're not in a default or collection status at that point until they get sent to a collection agency. So there are no threats being made for credit reporting. There's no negative conversations happening at that stage. It's literally just an extension of an internal accounts receivable team within the apartment operator's staff.
Yeah. The threats and the hammer don't come in until the collection agency starts. Is that right? Or is it a softer, even that through PayReady, is it a softer, gentler collections process?
It's very soft and gentle. It's literally just making it as easy as possible to, for residents to make good on anything that they owe.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if you have a point of view about generationally whether or not collection efforts succeed with Gen X, with a person on the phone, and Gen Z prefers to get a text message with a reminder, hey, you still owe this. Have you seen any kind of trends with respect to what works that's generational, or does one theme just work across the board better than others?
It takes both. There's definitely an uptick, I think, probably across all generations. People prefer to be communicated with via email, text message, those types of things, and make payments that way, and schedule their own payment plans that way, and choose their payment types through those scenarios. So we've noticed an uptick in the technology providing the preferred method in terms of just percentages of what gets paid comes through self-guided technology outreach with the resident. And oftentimes after hours, we found that over 60% of the payments that are made through our platform are either in the evenings and on the weekends when they're not busy with their day.
And how often or if ever, are platforms like Venmo, PayPal, are those being utilized these days?
We have not deployed those alternatives as of yet, but that's in our near-term roadmap. We facilitate credit card payments, ACH payments, debit card payments. But that's a good question. We have a cash alternative, so folks can use a QR code and go to, say, a 7-Eleven or Walmart and make cash payments. And that's just, there's a small uptick in that. But I expect that when we start to deploy things like Google Pay and Venmo, that will slowly pick up as well. PayPal.
Lynn, have you noticed any trends that lead to collection problems? In other words, are there things that you could advise your operators to do before somebody ends up in your hands to minimize the incidence of resident charges, of residents that don't pay? What mistakes are people making that lead to them having residents that depart with uncollected charges?
Yeah, there's a few things. I guess I'll speak a little bit to the process of onboarding a new client, because that ties into it. When we onboard a new client, one of the nice things about PayReady is we're one of the few technologies that requires almost no training for the site staff, because we pretty much take everything over. So once we get the integration set up and tested and all the information's moving correctly, we're one of the few solutions that's taking away a task from the site staff. They don't even get login information. They don't need to log in and interact with the platform, other than at the executive level or on a reporting level. But in that training, what we focus on is ensuring that they are updating the ledger correctly before the status gets changed for that integration push. And then oftentimes it's around documentation. So there are documents that just make the process easier to explain to residents and to defend move-out statements. pictures, those kinds of details, often are incomplete in the resident record within the property management system, and there has to be some communication back and forth. And we've built tools to facilitate that and make it as easy as possible. But as much of that is done prior to the push, that makes everyone's life easier. Statistically, one thing that we have seen is there is a threshold for, different companies have different philosophies on accelerated rent, meaning, okay, somebody has a 12-month lease and they leave at month 4 and there's 8 months still left of rent. There are some companies that have a philosophy, depending on the state and where they can legally do it, where they pretty aggressively try to go after that entire balance. And statistically, it's rare to accomplish that. So maintaining reasonable sort of thresholds about what you think you're going to really be able to recover is something that we've seen for sure.
Are there payment processes that are being adopted on the operation side, ways that people are accepting rent now that didn't really exist 5 years before, that are helping to solve some of this problem as well? And how do deposit alternatives? I heard you mention you work with them, but how do deposit alternatives benefit or affect, maybe generally speaking, this process?
I think the deposit alternatives have helped mitigate some of the move out costs for sure. We integrate with most of the larger companies in that space. One of the values that we bring to them is, because we're so deeply integrated and we have custom integrations with the property management systems on move out, particularly with the ledger and that sort of thing. So we're able to interact with those deposit alternatives post move out to ping against their system to see if there's a bond or a policy in place, whatever that might be, and give them the ledger details to help make sure we're applying what might be covered correctly, and then parsing the remittance out to the proper places. So we do help quite a bit in that area. The other thing that I think is going to continue to evolve is several things came about with the pandemic, where property management companies and payment providers were forced to get creative to facilitate payment plans for current residents, almost to the point of credit counseling and interacting with residents to help them figure out, the availability of government funds and how that applies to payments. And that's trickled down through post move out as well, where there's still, in some cases, government funds that are available and need to be applied to the ledger in different ways. So there's definitely been, I think there'll still be an evolution around that doesn't completely go away, facilitating ongoing, payment arrangements for current residents that maybe are behind or having trouble and things like that. I do see that changing. I think that the payment providers and current resident portals, as well as ourselves, and the way that we structure all of the payment plans, are going to continue to evolve and probably leave opportunities for there to be less aggregate owed at the end of a lease. And the other thing that happened in the pandemic that really helped PayReady to some extent is, there's rules and regulations that change quickly. So we were the only platform post-residency that was able to help companies comply with all of these changes that were happening fast. So for example, if a state were to say, oh, there's a collection moratorium, you can't collect on these files indefinitely, whatever that might be, because we have a system that has everything captured in one place, we could literally overnight enact that threshold and put everything on hold. Whereas before, if it's a manual process scattered about through collection agencies, you weren't ensured that you're going to be able to react quickly and adhere to those rule changes and policy changes.
Yeah, I can imagine that PayReady must have felt like a real superhero at that moment. Right place, right time. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Anything, as we wrap up here, anything on the horizon for PayReady? Next generation of technology or services you guys are going to be providing that you care to talk about or share?
Yeah, we're gonna thoughtfully build around the solution that we have. So things like the same concept basically applied to, say, eviction processing could be handled via our technology, move a little bit more upstream into current resident, things like that. Other than that, we're really sticking pretty close to our knitting for right now, and really focused on tweaking what we do and make it better. So things around BI, there's a lot of data that we have that could potentially be helpful for our clients. And then just improving performance through analyzing what's working and what's not, timing on outreach, when human intervention is best applied, those types of things. So we're putting a lot of energy into just being better at what we're doing.
Well, I really love the product fit, Lynn. I think it sort of like one of these dark recesses of the operational life cycle that people don't think about, that can draw a lot of time and energy from the staff. I reminds me of like when package lockers came around. We're like, yes, of course. We're spending hours and hours and hours dealing with packages. The collections part has always been a thorn in the side of operators, and it sounds like you guys have a very elegant way to help and deal with that. So congratulations on a fantastic idea. Great company. You guys have had a lot of success closing on 3 million units. So obviously the industry's embraced what you guys are doing, and we wish you continued success over there. Lynn, if people want to find out more about the company, where would they go?
PayReady.com. That's the easiest place. My email, lynn@payready.com. Feel free to reach out to me there, but there's a request a demo link on the website, and there's some more information out there as well. So you can certainly find us, and I definitely appreciate the time and the reaction. I like it.
Yeah, I bet. Congratulations, Lynn. It's having gone down the entrepreneurial path myself. I know it's not easy, and it's tremendously rewarding when you see a company and the value proposition that you offer be accepted and succeed. So kudos to you guys. Thanks for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.